Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have our usual roundup of stories affecting the Sikh community. And as the fallout over the Delhi blast begins to settle, as we often like to do, we're going to go through a couple of recent propaganda pieces emanating out of India that leverage that story and reveal just how they've been specifically designed to whip up not just anti-Sikh and anti-Khalistan hatred globally, but with a particular agenda to divide the Sikh community and turn it in on itself. And it makes interesting reading. Anyway, all that and more on today's show. But joining me, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. We are looking at a beautiful November across the country, and even more so in Ottawa. Tonight we're going to talk about the referendum stop this weekend in the nation's capital. So make sure that if you are in the Ottawa region and have not yet cast your vote in the referendum for Khalistan, make sure that you put that on your calendar. Also, we would love to see your videos and images this weekend, so by all means, share them in the comment section or email them direct. Angus will put the email address up at the end of the show, so stick around for that. Oh, there you go, it's up now. And also, don't forget that at the end of the show, we'll have your comments up there for today, so see if your comments made the grade today. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed, the magic of technology at the press of a button. There you go. But in the meantime, James and I will be bringing our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And indeed, at the end of the show, we will take a look at loads of great comments. So thank you, as always, for those. Right, James, as always, lots to get through. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
This weekend, as I stated, the Khalistan Referendum will be making its stop in the nation's capital here in Canada, in Ottawa, at Billings Estate. This is a national historic site, so how appropriate that we see as something that could be a part of a new national site, which will be located in Khalistan, of course, I'm talking about. So it is an exciting time for anyone in the region. The voting will be open from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. and, as I said, at Billings Park. So if you have not been following or you're not familiar with what the referendum is all about, we have created a whole report and article about it that's available on our Substack. But let's take a look here at what the introduction to this is. Again, we, of course, don't have footage from this weekend, so we've used some of our file footage from the referendum stop in Calgary. And, of course, you can see how amazing it is. There's people cooking food. There are people gathering and talking and celebrating the opportunity, whether it's a yes vote or a no vote. The opportunity is there to have your opinion shared. With that said, of course, if you are of non-Sikh background, you're always welcome to go down there, talk to people, learn about the culture, learn about Khalistan, learn about why it is so significant. And let's take a quick intro into that, as many people who are hopefully learning about Sikhi and Sikhism, as well as the Khalistan referendum, just like Angus and I. Here's some information for you. November the 23rd in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada is an exciting day to look forward to for the Sikh community and Sikh diasporas worldwide, as the Khalistan referendum moves in to its latest iteration in the nation's capital. This will take place in Ottawa, and it is the exact location of the Billings Estate National Historic Site. And it's not merely a community poll, it's a geopolitical flashpoint occurring against a backdrop of strained diplomatic relations between Ottawa and New Delhi, allegations of transnational repression, and a complex bifurcation of economic and security interests. The event represents the culmination of a multi-year global campaign orchestrated by Sikhs for Justice. This has successfully mobilized hundreds of thousands of participants across the UK, Europe, Australia, and, of course, North America. As we look over this campaign, it's also known as the ballot over bullet strategy that's been employed. The fierce countermeasures adopted by the Indian state, though, and the intricate sociological factors driving second and third generation Canadian Sikhs to cast ballots for a homeland many have never visited. Furthermore, we understand that there is a paradox of November 2025 where high-level trade delegations discussing critical minerals and aerospace coexist with mass rallies denouncing Indian occupation, illustrating the delicate tightrope walked by foreign policy. To comprehend the intensity of the excitement surrounding the November 23, 2025 referendum in Ottawa, one must first excavate the deep historical strata of Sikh alienation. The movement is not a spontaneous creation of the 21st century, but the manifestation of unresolved trauma and political marginalization dating back to the dissolution of the British Raj. The foundational grievance of modern Sikh political psyche lies in the partition of India in 1947. The division of the Punjab province between the newly independent dominions of India and Pakistan resulted in a cataclysmic demographic shift. The Sikh community, a minority in both new nations, suffered disproportionately, losing vast tracts of fertile farmland, historical estates, and of course access to holy shrines like the Nankana Sahib, the birthplace of Guru Nanak, and those were lost to Pakistan. In the immediate post-independence era, while the Hindu majority consolidated power in India and the Muslim majority in Pakistan, Sikhs felt like their distinct identity was being subsumed. The anxiety fueled the Punjabi province movement, launched in 1955 under the aegis of Akali Dal, the primary Sikh-centric political party. The movement's objective was linguistically grounded but religiously coded. They demanded the reorganization of state boundaries to create a Punjabi-speaking state which would, ostensibly, secure a Sikh demographic majority. The Indian state, wary of further balkanization, resisted these demands for over a decade. It was only in 1966 that the Punjab Reorganization Act trifurcated the region into the Sikh-majority Punjab, the Hindu-speaking Haryana, and the mountainous Himachal Pradesh. However, the 1966 settlement left critical economic and symbolic issues unresolved, which continue to fuel the separatist narrative today. The status of Chandigarh, a planned city that serves as the shared capital for both Punjab and Haryana, remains a bone of contention. Furthermore, the control over river waters, specifically the Ravi Bees, and the Sutlej systems became an existential dispute for the agrarian Sikh community. The perception that the central government in New Delhi was siphoning off Punjab's natural resources to other states laid the economic foundation for the Khalistan argument. There are many other reasons behind the need for a sovereign Sikh state, and of course, this is outlined in the full report available on our Substack station or platform. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go into all of the details on today's show, but we do invite you to definitely take part in the conversation. Both view the full report on our Substack and join the conversation here on Perspectives in the comment section. This is James Cousineau reporting for Sutlej TV. So as you can see, it is exciting. It's going to be a beautiful event, as I've attended the referendum votes in Vancouver, or Surrey to be exact, and in Calgary. I've enjoyed it because it is such a community environment and atmosphere. So if you're in the region this weekend, check it out. As I said, even if you're of non-Sikh background, hopefully that gave you a bit of idea as to what it is about. And go down and talk to people, enjoy yourself, and just really take part in the excitement and the atmosphere there. As we move on, we are again taking a look at our continued coverage this week of the 1984 genocide that took place in India and targeted the Sikh community. I've got a video here, as I've been doing all week, just playing snippets of different documentaries and trying to encourage people to watch these and to learn more and open up their minds to find out what is behind the violence, the transnational repression, and the foreign interference at the hands of the India government, and how far back it goes. But most of all, why it is so essential that the acts of 1984 are identified and labeled internationally as a genocide, because a lot of people are trying to just wipe it clear and call it a riot that is so far from the truth. Let's take a look at the emotional impact on another individual who has been scarred for life and has created generational trauma throughout from the incidences of 1984.
It was the total betrayal on the part of the government. We people couldn't even think of it, that they can do this to us.
The minds of the people were poisoned.
It turned out to be truly horrendous for India.
You are facing so much atrocities, torture, pressure, and still you are fighting.
ਸਾਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਗੋਲੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਚੱਲ ਗਏ ਤੇ ਖਤਮ ਹੈ.
I will not allow my children to face this type of situation in their life. So I decided to move them out of that.
ਮੈਂ ਨਿਊਜ਼ੀਲੈਂਡ ਆਉਣਾ, ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਵਧੀਆ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਹੋਣਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋਇਆ ਨਾ, ਵੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਆਇਆ ਤੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਮੈਂ ਸੁੱਤਾ, ਇੱਦਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕੀਤਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਦਰਵਾਜ਼ਾ ਕਿਤੇ ਖੁੱਲ੍ਹਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੋਵੇ.
I was born in India in 1954, that is after the partition. So my forefathers flew from the Punjab area, which is now in the Pakistan. This is my father, Jagjit Singh, and this is my mother. His name was Amrit Kaur. We were brought up in a very alien, very different atmosphere. We were one or two Sikh family in the entire locality. Because of our dress up, our appearance, we were humiliated, traumatized, beaten. People used to call us a refugee son. So humiliation was a part of the life for that. So it was very, very difficult for me, my family, my mother. And then my mother told me that, son, look, if you want to be strong, kalam di power, talwar di power to zyada hondi hai. The pen is more powerful than the sword.
Sikh is a very courageous community. Our founders have taught us Deg, Teg, Fateh. Deg actually means the community kitchen, but it is the compassion. Teg is the support, and Fateh means that is both. Whenever there is a need to help somebody, to show your compassion, the Sikhs will come forward. Whenever there is injustice, even if against a third party, a Sikh will stand there to protect him. So compassion and valor both goes together in the Sikhs.
The vision of our founding fathers and mothers was
So again, another wonderful documentary that really shows the impact on the generation that was there in 1984, whether that was the older generation or the young ones who had to flee the nation in order to secure some type of security and safety for their children and their families. 1984 saw the horrific acts that took part, and as this gentleman was just stating, that Sikhs are there to protect others, to stand for against injustice, to protect even if it's a third party. But who really was there protecting them in 1984? Who was there to save them from the horrific actions of the Hindutva, of the government of the day? And who was there to hold people accountable? And I can almost guarantee that when you think about it, you can really come up with nobody. The governments around the world stood back and allowed this to happen. There is some speculation and information that pushes towards the involvement of some governments that gave information and intelligence that supported the India government's genocide of the Sikh people. There were people that still to this day stand back and refuse to hold people accountable who were still alive today that have never faced justice for the atrocities, the rapes, the murders, the humiliating and really draconian actions of those few. When I say the few, I'm talking about the people who actually acted against the Sikhs. There were Hindus who opened their homes, that sacrificed their homes that were burnt down because they were caught hiding Sikhs in those residences. There were people that were beaten because they stood up and said, this is wrong, and we're going to help to protect these people who are of our nation. We are all one at the end of the day, that we all bleed the same blood. We all shed the same tears. And we all are traumatized by the actions of others in such genocidal acts. And therefore, I call on everyone to stand up and to send an email to your government, whether it's in Canada, the United States, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, anywhere in the world. Send the emails. Insist that they reach out to the international criminal courts or put pressure on India to hold those accountable who are still alive today, and where evidence exists that can prosecute them for the atrocities that they committed against the Sikh community. With that, Angus, I think that people are really starting to learn more about the history of India, but also the current status on how they are still involved in transnational repression, how they are still targeting minority groups, whether it's the Sikhs, whether it's the Muslims, whether it's the Dalits. And for that to continue in a modern day, for a country that claims to be such a democracy, the world's largest democracy, they say, I would turn that and say it's actually the world's largest failure to hold people accountable, Angus.
Yeah, and I think that's really the key issue here. It's all about hypocrisy. The key word here is hypocrisy. It's the hypocrisy of Western governments, and it's the hypocrisy of India itself. As you rightly say, India is always the first to stand up and say, we are the world's largest democracy. Well, the evidence that actually undermines that whole statement is out there on a daily basis. We even yesterday we talked about Sikhs in Canada, for example, who have threats to their lives. They have these warnings given to them by the state saying your life is under threat from India. We have the same here in the UK. We have Sikh activists and campaigners who literally live on a day-to-day basis under threat of their lives from India. And yet we have the Indian government, the Indian state saying, we are the world's largest democracy. Well, democracies don't have people who literally have had to flee for their lives. And again, that video you shared about 1984, well, let's not forget that what followed in the 1980s and 1990s was this effectively long-term genocide against young Sikh men who were extrajudicially murdered by the Indian state for, nearly 2 decades. And again, that's only a few years ago. It's in living memory. Again, at a time when India claimed itself to be a democracy. Clearly, India is not a genuine democracy. It is not a democracy how you and I see it, in certainly from our perspective. And then the hypocrisy also sits very large amongst our own leaders here in the West, because again, as we often say, our own leaders are shaking hands with Narendra Modi. They are welcoming the Minister the Home Minister Jai Shankar and shaking hands and talking trade deals and talking about, let's build bridges with India, let's build trade deals, let's do commerce, let's potentially invest in India. Well, this is a nation that is claiming itself to be a democracy and clearly isn't, and we are nations that claim to support the rule of law, that claim to stand up for democratic principles. As I keep saying, we have invaded countries for less to impose our democracy upon these nations. And yet, here we have India, which is guilty of all sorts of abuses of human rights, which are well documented, and not just historically, but even to the present day. The minorities in India are under the cosh of an Indian state that does not want them there, that wants to try to convert them into Hinduism, that wants its Hindu Rashtra at the expense of its minorities. Human rights abuses are risible. They are terrible in India. And we often I use the phrase banana republic. India is not a banana republic, but some of its actions reflect the actions of a banana republic, certainly not those of a democracy. And this is why, again, the real key word here is hypocrisy. Hypocrisy on the part of all our leaders, and certainly here in the West. And I'm always the first to stand up and hold our leaders to account, saying, why are you welcoming India? Yes, I understand the real politic element. Yes, we do need to have at least relations with India because they are potentially a huge market, etc. But this cannot be at the expense of what our principles stand for, of what our democracy stands for. That is the rule of law and normal democratic freedoms of speech and freedoms of expression to practice our religions, whatever those religions may be. And here in the UK, we stand very proud about our multicultural society, our freedoms that we have taken for granted, that sadly now it seems to be increasingly restricted, but that's a different story. But ultimately, we as a society cannot stand up and say in all good conscience and start criticising India if we ourselves are not practising those same principles and not holding India up to account. Why, again, are we welcoming Indian leaders and not telling them about Jagtar Singh Johal, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, Gurpratwant Singh Pannoon, the oppression of the Muslims at the moment, and all these pieces of legislation that are used to imprison political dissenters? It's just not right, James. To me, it's just totally undemocratic.
Absolutely. And that's where we need that international pressure. As I said, I would love for people to actually take the initiative, no matter what background you come from, to send those emails, to send those messages loud and clear to politicians around the world that we need to start holding India accountable. We got to stop turning a blind eye in the name of security and trade. We need to make sure that they understand that the world is not going to sit back and allow them to treat and mistreat their people in the ways that they are.
Indeed. And talking of hypocrisy, I'm going to move on to my first story. And I said in the introduction, we do like to dip in every now and again into Indian propaganda, Hindutva propaganda, because, if it wasn't so serious, it would actually be funny. So these propaganda pieces are just hilarious pieces of utter deep hypocrisy. But ultimately, they serve their purpose of propaganda. But what is, I think particularly insidious, to borrow the word you used earlier, James, that what is particularly insidious about these propaganda pieces is they are designed and they're mass produced by the Hindutva bots, etc., in this huge media machine that supports the Hindutva RSS movement, and they are churned out right across mainstream media and of course social media and these sort of other news outlets that portray themselves as serious mainstream news outlets. And one that I particularly like to dip into on a regular basis is Khalsa Vox. Now, Khalsa Vox is It portrays itself as representing the Sikh community, and most of its stories tend to be obviously have a bias towards the Sikh society in terms of what it covers. Its interests obviously around the Punjab and around Sikh issues. But in amongst that, and this is why the propaganda really, I suppose, works to some extent, and this is, again, a very typical propaganda tactic, is it infiltrates, it infuses quite reasonable stories with just subtle pieces and less subtle pieces, pushing across the Hindutva agenda again. And what this agenda is, and as I said in the introduction, its real agenda at the moment is to try not just to turn the general population of India and indeed the diaspora against the Sikh community, but it's also really trying very hard now to try and divide the Sikh community itself and let it turn in on itself, to try and divide Sikhs so that they start arguing against each other, they start inserting arguments and again just trying all all these little tactics, these subtle tactics, so that Sikhs turn against themselves. Because, as we discovered recently, Hindutva is losing this battle. It is losing the information war. It is losing the propaganda war, because the West and Western leaders, and particularly Western politicians, are actually waking up to what India is and what it actually genuinely represents. And it isn't this nice, warm, fuzzy, cozy sort of spiritual land of gurus. It's something a little bit darker. And it is something, as we've often talked about, it represents values that really shouldn't be associated with a so-called democratic nation. And so as it's realising, as the RSS are realising, they are losing this information war. And despite the amount of disinformation and misinformation that they are trying to spread around the media, they realise they are losing this war. So saying, okay, we need to adopt new tactics. This Sikh community is growing in power. It is growing in publicity. Its public awareness around the world, particularly the Khalistan movement, is growing in popularity. It is gaining momentum. More and more people outside the Sikh community are understanding what Khalistan represents, and they support it. Why wouldn't they? And so they're realising this. They're saying, okay, we need a new tactic. We've got to try and turn Sikhs amongst each other. We've got to try and portray this Khalistan movement as they have done in the past. It's just a fringe movement. It's a fringe of extremists. It's just a bunch of militant terrorists, essentially, is the message they're trying to put across. So I'm just going to go through a couple of pieces that have just only come out in the last couple of days. This is post-Delhi blast. And of course, every time we have a big event, for example, like Pahalgam or the recent Delhi blast, and indeed the explosion in Kashmir, is that the Hindutva forces, these sort of these IT cells, as they're called, they're always looking for opportunities to write pieces to try and twist the narrative and turn it against the Sikh community, turn it against the Khalistan movement, and again try and leverage it. So again, it tries to turn Sikhs against each other. So the first piece I'm going to cover is let me have a look. Here we go. Right. So again, it talks about the Delhi blast. And I'm going to go through this. I'm going to cherry pick a few of the sort of paragraphs just to demonstrate how this propaganda works. So it talks about the Delhi blast, and post this blast, it triggered what they called a wave of misinformation and disturbing propaganda by Khalistan sympathisers across social media. Well, again, the irony here, it drips large. I mean, it's not the Khalistan movement that is spreading in misinformation. It is, of course, Khalsa Vox, amongst many other propaganda outlets. Now, it says that the Khalistanis' reaction, notably marked by baseless conspiracy theories, insensitive remarks, stands in stark contrast to the core values of Sikhism. Now, this, again, is another little insidious tactic that they're using increasingly now. It is saying, look, Sikhism stands for all the wonderful things that we talk about, Chardi Kala, etc., and save the self for service. So what it's saying is it's now trying to contrast the actions of Khalistanis particularly, and a section of the Sikh community, as saying they're not genuine Sikhs. How can they be genuine Sikhs when they're supposed to represent these great values of Sikhism? But they're not demonstrating that. So again, you can start to see how this division is being set out in this piece. Probably because they themselves resort to violence and extremism to further their own agenda. Now, again, we come back to this all Khalistanis are terrorists. Now, again, obviously, the Khalistan movement is nothing to do with violence and extremism. You show me, as I often say to our critics, show me any evidence of violence and extremism. There was a militant movement during the 1980s and 90s. That was nothing to do with Khalistan. That was to do with the self-defensive measure post-1984 and to try and fight back against the extrajudicial murders of the Indian state. So again, show me any violence and extremism. I do not see any extremism, and I certainly don't see any violence from the Khalistan movement. So again, this sort of almost state it as fact. It says, oh, this is a fact that it's violent and extremist. Of course it's not. These Khalistan sympathisers fail to call out acts of terror or condemn attacks like the Red Fort blast. Well, that is, again, patently untrue. And it talks about conspiracy theories. Well, unsurprisingly, like many of our commenters have done, saying it's very highly likely that events like these blasts are false flags because India and RAW, the intelligence services, the intelligence agencies of India, have a track record of false flag incidents. For example, the Chitty Singh Pura massacre, amongst many other false flag events. So it's not unreasonable that these claims are made across social media, etc. And again, it talks about their history of aggression violence, association with the tactics of countries like Pakistan. And here, this is where actually they let slip where this is coming from. Of course it's Hindutva RSS, because any normal journalist wouldn't associate any tactics of Khalistan with Pakistan. Actually, Pakistan has been a great friend to Sikhs. As we've often talked about, the relationship between Pakistan and the Sikh community of the Punjab particularly has been very warm and very good, because as a simple example, the Kartarpur corridor was essentially negotiated by a benign Pakistan to allow Punjabi Sikhs to cross the border into Pakistan as a pilgrimage to the Gurdwara in Kartarpur. And it's India, in our post-Pahalgam, it's India that closed the border, that prevented Sikhs from crossing the border into Pakistan, despite the fact that Pakistan was offering free visas to Sikhs wanting to cross. So the evidence is very clear that Pakistan is a friend to Punjabi Sikhs. And yet, here in this piece, there's very subtle nuance in this piece, where it says they're adopting the aggression, violence and association with tactics of Pakistan. In other words, what this person, the writer, is implying is that Pakistan is an enemy, it is aggressive, it is violent, etc., etc. No, Pakistan is not that. Pakistan is guilty of some things, but it is not guilty of that. But what this does demonstrate, this is a very typical stance of Hindutva. If you read any Hindutva posts, right-wing extremist posts on social media, they're always anti-Pakistan. Pakistan's aggressive. Pakistan's full of Muslims, full of Muslim terrorists, blah, blah, blah. So in other words, again, it's just a little clue to this wasn't written by a genuine Sikh. This wasn't written by a genuine Punjabi Sikh. This was written by Hindutva. It's Hindutva propaganda, because, again, this just lets slip this anti-Pakistan hatred that a normal, decent Punjabi Sikh wouldn't actually come out with, because, as I say, Punjabi Sikhs see Pakistanis actually as amicable. They have a good relationship with them. And again, as the piece goes on, it tries to juxtapose, to use a horrible big word, but what it's trying to do is put two concepts together to try and divide the community. It's saying, look, the Sikhs have this spirit of peace and service, and yet the Khalistanis align with extremism. So in other words, again, it's trying to move the Khalistan movement away from Sikhism. It's trying to claim that the Khalistan movement is nothing to do with Sikhism, because Sikhi is all about peace and service. Yet the Khalistan movement is all about extremism, violence, etc., which obviously doesn't represent Sikhi. So again, you can see how this piece is again trying to create a division between the Khalistan movement and Sikhi, and of course there is no division. Khalistan stands for the fundamental principles of Sikhi, so again it's nonsense. So again, it talks about the misinformation. It says, within hours of the blast, several social media accounts, mostly associated with Khalistanis, began circulating false claims, the allegations of false flags, etc., etc., and unsubstantiated stories of evidence tampering by Indian media or investigators. These propagandists, and again, the hypocrisy drips large here, these propagandists, as he said in this piece of propaganda, have weaponized grief, spreading rumours rather than a rallying call for help. Divisive rhetoric, it calls it. It runs counter to Sikh philosophy, which advocates peace, resilience, compassion in the face of adversity. Again, trying to differentiate, trying to separate Khalistanis away from Sikhi. And again, it's nonsense. And again, it talks about weaponizing grief. Now, the only people who've weaponized grief and victimhood is, of course, the Hindutva forces, as we often talk about in North America, how Hindutva have used this tactic of trying to claim themselves as victims. We are victims of oppression from Khalistan, from Sikhs. Again, it's absolute nonsense. And then it says, the reactions by these groups haven't just been insensitive, they directly contradict the foundational tenets of Sikhism. Again, trying to create this division between the Khalistan movement and Sikhi. And Khalistan sympathisers often exploit tragic incidents to further their own divisive agenda. Well, again, I use this word hypocrisy. Well, here we have a propaganda piece doing this very thing. It's trying to create division, as I'm defining very clearly with all the evidence. This piece is using an event, a tragic incident. It is exploiting a tragic incident to further its own divisive agenda. So again, you can see the hypocrisy here. Resorting to conspiracy theories, violence, blah, blah, blah. It incites hatred, but undermines the efforts of genuine Sikh organisations. So again, it's trying to separate the Khalistan movement from what it says are genuine Sikh organisations. Well, again, it's complete nonsense. It reveals a true intent not to serve or uplift the community, but to fuel fear and polarisation. Well, I think, again, obviously it's nonsense. The Khalistan movement is actually a unifying force. It is a force trying to resist these divisive policies, this divisive agenda. It's trying to unify the Sikh people behind its own flag. So again, it's you can see the nonsense of this piece. And finally, it says it is a betrayal of Sikh ideals and the tradition of communal harmony. No, it's not at all. But again, so that piece, as you can see, the whole agenda of that piece is it's not a totally new tactic, but certainly I'm seeing a bias now towards this agenda. Clearly, the forces of the RSS have passed down the chain of command to the IT cells. Right, we need to see more pieces trying to divide the Sikh community. We need more pieces to try and say the Khalistan movement not just is a violent and extremist movement and a bunch of terrorists, but now we need to try and force the Khalistan movement to be turned upon by the rest of the Sikh community. Let's try and incite hatred amongst the Sikh community against the Khalistan movement by tactics like this. So again, it's a very powerful agenda that they're trying to push. I did actually look at this guy. And what was his name? Paraminder Singh Sodhi. We've covered pieces by him before, and if you look at all his past pieces, they all tend to be anti-Khalistan pieces. So he is just the guy. I'm not even sure the guy actually even exists. We do talk about AI, James, and how AI can quickly mass produce these propaganda pieces. It's quite possible this guy doesn't even exist, and this is just another piece of propaganda generated by AI under a fake sort of name. But one of his other pieces that came out just a couple of days ago, this was the 16th of November, so a couple of days ago, it talks about, again, this is what we covered a couple of days ago. This was the G7 protest by the Khalistan campaigners, and again, it's just a horrible piece, trying to undermine the power of protest and undermine the spirit and the the credibility of the Khalistan movement. And it talks about how this handful of self-styled Khalistan activists continue to misrepresent Sikh interests. And again, you can see how this divisive agendas come into this piece as well, while offering little more than noise, confusion and optics that hurt the community rather than help it. Again, trying to turn the Sikhs against the Khalistan movement. And it tries to belittle the protests. It says the crowd was so small that it was outnumbered by the police officers, and within minutes authorities asked them to disperse. The group quietly complied. So much for the mass movement they claimed to represent. Well, we only need to look at the referendum, James, and it was interesting that you covered the referendum also today, because, well, again, this is an old argument that Hindutva have tried to use, an old tactic, saying it's just a fringe movement. Even Narendra Modi himself has said it's just a fringe movement. It's not a fringe movement. And even this piece it tries to belittle it, saying it's not a mass movement. It's just a handful of people standing in the cold weather. No, it's not a small movement. It does represent a huge number of people. Hundreds of thousands of Sikhs have turned out. Men, women and children. Families have turned out to vote in the Khalistan referendum, and they would do the same in the Punjab if they were given the chance to do so, which under a normal democracy they would, but in India they won't be allowed to. So again, you can start to see the nonsense in this piece. And again, this I really particularly highlighted this phrase: who gave these fringe actors the right to speak for us? Well, it's called democracy, mate. This is what we can do in a democratic nation. We can actually go out and protest. I can hold up a flag saying, I hate the colour pink, because I'm allowed to. I can do whatever, I can say whatever I like, as long as I don't incite violence or break the law. We're allowed to do that here in a democracy, in Canada, in North America, in Europe. We're allowed to do that. We're not allowed to do that in India, in your country, mate. We can't do that, because if we do that, we end up in prison like Amrit Pal Singh, and amongst many others. So again, I had to highlight that one particular piece, which really irked, I have to say, the absolute hypocrisy of it. Opportunistic groups have wrapped themselves in the Khalistan banner while engaging in behaviour that does nothing to advance Sikh rights, justice or dignity. Again, just the nonsense of this very phrase is the whole point of the Khalistan movement, is to advance Sikh rights, justice and dignity. Because as we often say, there is no justice or dignity for Sikhs in the Punjab under the kosh of Indian oppression and the Indian state. They can only achieve that through the establishment of Khalistan. And the piece continues, they create tension, they attract scrutiny and hand opponents easy ammunition to paint Sikh Canadians unfairly. Well, that's absolute nonsense. It's deeply frustrating to watch a movement with real historical grievances. Oh, that's interesting. So at least it does acknowledge that the Sikh community does have genuine historical grievances. but they're now saying it's dragged down by people who seem more interested in theatrics than meaningful advocacy. Well, if you don't think the Khalistan movement is meaningful advocacy, you have absolutely no understanding of politics or geopolitics or anything to do with society. So again, the author of this piece is pretty ignorant, and the ignorance sort of drips from every line. Sikh Canadians are not rallying behind these groups. In fact, most want nothing to do with them. Really? Is that true? I don't see that. The only people I see turning against it are the right-wing extremists in Canada, but otherwise I'm seeing a lot of support coming from politicians, coming from the general public, and likewise, and just to throw the UK into this, every time the Sikh community posts up something on social media that white people see, there is a long list of comments in support of these people, in support of the whole concept of a Sikh nation, etc. So it's complete nonsense to say that this fringe movement, so-called, is not liked by Canadians or other people. It's absolutely not true. And again, this is why they're losing the war, and they realise it. They're trying to sort of create this image that nobody likes you. Actually, on the contrary, you're losing the war. Nobody's starting to like you, India. That's the key problem there. Well, not India, Hindutva. And then it finally wraps up. So these stunts don't strengthen the community; they diminish it. Now, the only thing diminishing the community is propaganda pieces by the Indian Hindutva forces. They are the party that is diminishing and undermining and damaging and destroying the Sikh community, its culture and its heritage. You only need to look at what's happening at Punjab University to immediately dismiss that phrase. As Sikhs, we have every right to raise concerns about human rights, foreign interferences and justice, and indeed they do. But we also have a responsibility to call out those who exploit these issues for attention while tarnishing the image of an entire community. And it's time we stop letting a fringe minority pretend otherwise. Now, I'm going to turn that completely 180 degrees. This you could write about Hindutva. It's time we stop letting this fringe minority of Hindutva pretend otherwise. Hindutva does not represent India. Hindutva represents a small minority ruling elite of India. It does not represent ordinary Indians, the vast majority of Dalits, of lower caste people who live under the cosh of this caste system. It does not represent the normal democratic values. It does not represent the rule of law. It represents a fringe minority of extremist nationalists. That's what it represents. That is what this piece can be completely turned back against them. It is these people who are at fault. This is, as I say, it's a hilarious piece of propaganda, and it would be funny if it wasn't so serious. But unfortunately, we see a lot of this, but it's always useful just to point out these pieces, go through them and pick them apart and actually try to understand what the latest propaganda technique is, what the latest tactic is, and clearly it is to try again to turn Sikhs upon themselves. And this, of all times, is when the Sikh community must unite, as indeed it does very well. In fact, watch my podcast later this week as one example of that. But the Sikh community is known for its unity, its belief in its Sikhi values, its practice of its Sikhi values, and of course it's standing up to oppression and nonsense like this, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And I mean, where to start with all of that? Because we've covered so many times on the program about the whole systematic use of propaganda and how whether it is the use of bots or whether it's like this in the formula that they try to encompass the actual news, but putting those trigger words in there to try to create an echo chamber, to create a division between the communities. And we know that when they turn around, they try to refer to the Khalistan movement and the referendum as a fringe movement. Well, a fringe movement would not see over 500,000 people turn out for referendum votes across Canada, let alone the referendum votes in other countries. This weekend in Ottawa, with the referendum taking place, again, it will be a clear sign of how this is not a fringe movement. It is something that is valued by the Sikh people who have the opportunity to take part in although non-binding at this point, a referendum that allows them to express their vote, to express their opinion, and to be heard. And again, this clearly shows that it's not a fringe movement. It is something that is justified, it is supported, and it is well respected. And that's my opinion on it. But I think that the numbers really back that opinion, Angus.
Absolutely. As you say, the evidence tells the truth. Yeah. And the evidence is very clear. Is that if you believe it is a fringe movement, then hold a referendum in Punjab. And if you're right, the whole thing goes away forever, or at least for generations. And it's a bit like the Scottish referendum for Scottish independence here in the UK. We gave the Scots a referendum because they were campaigning vociferously for independence. And so, of course, being a genuine democratic nation, we gave the land of Scotland a referendum to vote for it. And yeah, the United Kingdom argument won, and the kingdom was kept united, and the Scottish independence movement was seen to be a minority. And that, well, I wouldn't say it's gone completely away. Of course, here in democracy, we're still are completely open to people campaigning for it. But you can't get that in the Punjab. Is that, and as I say, the simple argument to the Indian government is if you genuinely believe it is a fringe movement and you're not afraid of it, then hold a referendum. Prove to the world that it is a fringe movement. Do it. Live your democratic principles. Hold a referendum. Let's just see how fringe this movement is. And of course, we know why they don't hold the referendum. It's because we know, they know, and everybody knows is that the Khalistan movement would find a resounding yes vote for Khalistan. So anyway, James, let's move on to our comments column. And thank you to Stay Safe, who kicks us off today. This was an interesting comment. Talk about how humans are natural inventors. We have an innovative gene in our makeup, in our DNA. And you refer to this book, this great book, How We Got to Now by Stephen Johnson. It shows how innovation and change flourishes when it's given the opportunity. Yet too often something important is overlooked. Sikhism has always offered opportunities. It's always been an inclusive faith, but of course the kindness is taken for granted. Yes, of course, people, other religions, and I won't name the particular one, have taken advantage of Sikhs because of what they perceive as a weakness, because they are open and generous. These young university students could have been the greatest turban scientists of tomorrow, like the father of fibre optics, but India holds minorities back. And this is actually an important point, because basically, yes, ultimately, this university, it is the nurturing ground, it is the garden from which could sprout the future scientific heroes. There could be cures for all sorts of diseases springing out of this university, all sorts of amazing technological advancements. But ultimately, if it's being held back by political forces, if the growth of the university is being held back by ridiculous political forces, that's never going to happen. And this is why, again, and this is a powerful argument, again, for Khalistan, because the university should fall under the governance of Khalistan, which will, of course, naturally, it won't involve politics in the university. It will nurture those young students. It will nurture those brilliant young minds to create the future inventions. And again, this is part of this huge commercial advantage of Khalistan, is that it will be a fertile ground for innovation, and the University of Punjab will form probably the nucleus of that future innovation, James.
Absolutely. And I mean, when we look at this, we are naturally and inherently curious. But when we see the problems that are facing our communities, our health, our technology, whatever it is, we want to find solutions. And I really think that this points to a fact that India is holding back, whether it's the Sikhs, whether it is Punjab University and such, they are holding them back. And the danger of the state, or in this case the federal government, the BJP, Narendra Modi and their proxies, controlling the narrative of a university, to control the actual curriculum, to control what can be taught, I think is a very dangerous and precedent-setting opportunity for failure. And I don't think that is just failure within the one university. I think that it is a failure for society and the advancement of benefit for all humankind, Angus.
Authoritarian regimes always control education. That's always one huge red flag about any authoritarian regime, is when they try to take control of the education sector. Gurpreet Kaur, when the Indian government functions in a way that suits their agenda of the Hindu Rashtra and Hindutva, the minorities are treated as second or third class citizens. Then to call it democracy is a joke. Yeah, this is back to what we were saying earlier, James, is that India cannot claim itself a democracy if it's treating its minorities as second or third class citizens. The human rights violations are at a peak, with minimum freedom of speech that doesn't go against the government's interests. Yeah, this is 10, 11 years of the BJP. We are seeing a crescendo, let's call it, of restrictions upon human rights, James, and human rights abuses.
Yeah. Absolutely. And again, something that we've covered at Lightum, Angus, and even in looking at the introduction to Khalistan, the first video tonight, it really shows the ways that democracy is not working for all in India.
Indeed, and Kuldeep Singh's comment again comes back to 1984, the involvement of the RSS and of course of the Congress Party and the Gandhi dynasty about the oppression and well, let's call it what it was, the murders that went on in 1984. Justice delayed, justice denied. It's back to this old argument: is that the politicians in India are behind this? Are we ever going to see justice? I think we know the answer to that one, James.
Absolutely. And in these documentaries, we've been featuring clips from the last few days. If you take the time to watch them, you'll really see the evidence that has been laid out that show Congress members inciting the violence, that police were not only inciting violence, but providing some of the weapons and the petrol and other instruments of destruction, so to speak. So again, it really shows that the RSS, the Congress, the police, and other politicians had a very, very deep hand in the atrocities that were committed.
And the truth is, the message that we often have to highlight is the Sikh community is never going to get genuine justice from India over 1984 and the genocide. It's just never going to happen. As long as the RSS and Hindutva control India, which is for the foreseeable, it's just never going to happen. The only way justice is ever going to be served, or at least freedom is going to be achieved, is through the establishment of Khalistan. So, Hat B. So all BJP and RAW planted evidence, all the evidence that they planted has been destroyed. A massive amount of explosive material, including this ammonium nitrate, has been found in a Bajrang Dal, in an RSS Bajrang Dal supporters' home in Ghaziabad. Good heavens, my pronunciations. But Modi's controlled media are not telling that news. Well, are you surprised? The Godi media, again, we talk about how undemocratic India is and its lack of free press. Well, of course, the press is completely controlled. The narrative that most ordinary Indians, in fact, pretty much all ordinary Indians, are ever exposed to are these lies, this completely twisted, untrue narrative. As you said, maybe the ammonium nitrate that caused the Delhi blast was going there too, but the Indian media will use the blast for their anti-Muslim propaganda. Of course, the Hindutva forces are turning their focus on the Muslim population, and as you've warned in recent days, Hatby, is that, there clearly does seem to be, again, this increasing agenda to marginalise certainly the Muslim population. It's not just the Sikhs who are under the cosh, of course it is the Muslim population. And as you say, thank you guys for being the voice of the Sikh community. Well, we are just one small voice of the Sikh community. There are many voices. Thank heavens, there are many activists. Bless all those guys who literally are risking their lives on a daily basis, whether in the diaspora or in the Punjab itself. They are standing up for the Sikh community. We are but a tiny voice doing our little bit, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's also thank all of the viewers out there who really share our voice by sharing it with others, by being involved in the conversation, by liking and commenting on the videos. This really helps us to get the message out there and for being a voice of the Sikh community. But we are, as Angus says, just that small little voice there. So you can help us to magnify and amplify our voice by just continuing to support the channel. You can find ways to do that in the link tree that gives you the different platforms and ways that you can help support our channel. But again, to help us with our issue that we've been experiencing even more so lately, as I'd say the last month and a half, is of course the shadow banning. And again, if you can share the videos, invite people to come and check out the program, then that definitely helps and goes a long way. And again, just really, we appreciate being a part of this journey and the support of all of our viewers that are watching. So thank you.
Yeah, that's a very important point because, again, as we often say, I mean, our single voices are not powerful, but it's when we unite into larger groups, that's when things happen. That's when policies change and awareness is raised. And it's very much beholden on you in our audience. We need you guys to get out there. We are all united as one big family, let's call it. And we need you guys to spread the message, share our videos across social media, get more people to subscribe and to share our videos. You know, let's try and get as many videos out there and spread across social media, particularly in India where possible, because that's the audience we're really trying to reach as well, is the people suffering in India. So again, very much say all of us are the voice of the Sikh community, and the bigger that voice is, the more effective it will be. And then final set is kicked off by Ujagar Singh, who quite often dips in with a hello, and it's a hi, hello everyone. Well, a hello to you and hello to all our audience, and a big shout out to Ujagar Singh for your comments, your continued comments, and thank you for that. And for, of course, this is very representative of many people who do just dip in just to say, a hi or a Khalistan Zindabad. Again, thanks very much for all your comments. It does help us as well. It helps the algorithm, even if you just leave a 2-word comment, but whatever. But as I say, we do appreciate all the comments, and we get that feeling of goodwill, don't we, James, from our audience?
Exactly, and we appreciate every one of the comments, even if it's just letting us know where you're watching from. And welcome, I noticed somebody from India watching one of the documentaries on the feed there. So again, welcome to those, and share the idea that you can use a VPN or change location settings and all of that to watch us in India. We want to see more people there, so that's good news.
Fantastic indeed. As I said, we do need more viewers in India. We need more people in India able to access our channel, because, as I say, that they're the people we really need to reach, to let them know that you are being lied to on a daily basis. So, Darminder,
it was probably the RSS that I pissed off, but that's besides the point.
I think we're both very much guilty of that. I dread to think our names will be sitting on a file somewhere in Delhi. I have no doubt about that. Darmendar Banins says, "Good work, Sir Angus and Jamas." And I had a chuckle about this. It's a very obscure reference, but there's a fantastic. There's an old comedy series here in the UK called Goodness Gracious Me, and it was actually written and produced by a load of Indian diaspora comedians, and it will bring tears. As a white person, it brought tears to my eyes in terms of breaking down barriers between communities. It did so much positive work for breaking down barriers between the Indian diaspora and the rest of the UK. But there was just one particular sketch which comes to mind, and maybe some of our British viewers might be familiar with the sketch. It's the Curry House sketch, or the Game for an English, and the waiter is called James, and he is pronounced Jamas. So again, it's a very obscure reference, but do please, if you're interested, do look out. Goodness Gracious Me, Going for an English sketch. It brings tears to my eyes when I watch it. It takes the mickey out of white British people in a very nice sort of way. But that's why I chuckle about that. The pronunciation of the name Jamas, James.
I'll have to check it out, because I'm unfamiliar with that. So now you've got me curious. I've got to watch it, because I love everything comedy.
Indeed, absolutely. As I say, even our audience, if you've never watched that series, goodness gracious me, it was back in, was it the 1990s? But it's just full of the most hilariously wonderful sketches. And again, talking about my love of India, it's things like that generate this really good feeling towards ordinary Indians, obviously not Hindutva and the RSS, but just ordinary Indians and the wonderful, rich culture of India. And Kiran Deep, thanks both of us, and as I always do, I like to send it back on our audience. No, thank you. It is thanks to you that we are here. It is thanks to you that we can talk about many of these issues and talk about our wonderful audience. And the final sign off goes to Ragveer Singh and Voice Punjab, who both say Khalistan Zindabad, James, with a great big fat red love heart.
And it's right back at you. We wouldn't be here without you, but again, we're all here for the same cause, and that is the experience to broadcast this show from the capital of Khalistan one day.
Indeed, fingers crossed on that one. We know it's coming, but unfortunately there we must leave the show for another day. Thanks so much for watching. Do keep your comments coming in, and don't forget you can message us at message@satlugetv.com if there's anything you'd like to bring to our attention. Thank you to those of you who have emailed. If I haven't responded, my apologies, but I do read your emails and I do follow the links that you sent through, so thank you. And even if we don't cover those stories, they all put into a pot of things that we potentially can talk about, so do keep the links coming in. Don't feel we're not reading them. We certainly do, and we do appreciate them. But that's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.